So, you wrote a book, which was really interesting. And what I want to talk about is not the content of the book, but just talk us through the model that you use to write that book, because it was really different and unusual.
Sure. So I published a book, as you said, published a couple of books in the past, but the most recent one was called Marketing Now, roughly about 60,000 words long, which is a standard length of a book. And I didn't fancy sitting down and writing 60,000 words. So
I'm not sure I could, David, to be quite frank.
I've not got a brilliant ability to sit down for hours on end and write thousands of words. I think I could perhaps commit to writing maybe 500 words in one sitting and then go back 120 times to do it. But even then, it would be tough to do because you wouldn't get the final version. Then you'd have to continually edit it. So I thought, okay. I've published lots of podcasts. I've published lots of live streams in the past. So I've produced lots of transcripts as a result of doing that. So how many words is the average podcast episode? How many average, and quite a few thousand words actually, just for a half-hour episode. And it turns out that an 8-hour live stream is roughly 60,000 words. Now, I'm not advocating necessarily to do just an 8-hour live stream, make it into a transcript and publish that as a book, because that would be a fairly horrible book to read. People don't necessarily talk as they would write. But what I did do the year before last was I did 8 hours of live stream, and I had the transcript made and then completely broke it down into different categories. I wrote around that. I obviously made sure that the transcript was spot on before editing it quite significantly and getting approval from each participant as well. So how did that come about? Well, I mentioned it was an 8-hour live stream. I had 134 marketers join me, all answer the same question: what's your number one actionable marketing tip for the coming year? And they all gave me that. But the reason why I was able to do that was because I started a podcast a few years before that. I built great relationships with people, and I became comfortable at producing a podcast. But then I went through a step-by-step process from starting the audio podcast to being able to publish the book, and obviously just before publishing the book, doing the 8-hour live stream. So number one is start off with a basic audio-only podcast. I advocate a Samsung Q2U microphone, a just nice microphone windscreen, and a boom arm. You're talking about roughly £100 to start off with. Many people have what's called a condenser microphone. They have maybe a boardroom with a big microphone in the middle that picks up people nicely, but it also does a great job of picking up room echo as well, and everything else that happens to be going on in the room. So it's not an ideal podcast microphone. The best type of podcast microphone, if you're working from home, if you're working from an office, is a dynamic microphone, because it doesn't pick up too much noise from around. So that's the type of microphone that I recommend to begin with. So master the art of doing a simple pre-recorded podcast to begin with, using relatively basic equipment that can still result in decent sound. It'll take 20 episodes or so to find your voice, to find your style that you want to produce, but you'll get there. And then after you do that, step two, after about 20 episodes or so, is then you can focus on production quality a little bit more.
Yes.
I've got a better microphone. I've got an RE20 microphone. I've got a Rodecaster. You can start to use more professional type of equipment after that. You can start to bring in bumper noises, different elements.
What's a bumper noise, David?
Bumper noises are
secret software.
Things like that. So we didn't plan that beforehand.
No, we didn't.
I've always got everything hooked up.
Brilliant.
But thanks for the leading question there. But you can actually start to have fun doing it, and you can also make the production of your podcast more efficient as well, and that you don't have to add your intros and outros afterwards as well, so you have to do less editing afterwards. We're still doing audio-only podcasts at this stage, but then step 3, turn on your camera. But don't go live yet. So turn on your camera. I used a Logitech C920 camera to begin with.
That's what I use.
And that's a lovely, basic, exactly starter microphone, webcam. Sorry, and it's high definition. It records in decent quality. It's got autofocus on there as well. if you're wanting to spend a little bit more and ensure that your video is a reasonable standard, then lighting's the next step. There are three important lights to think of. One is a key light. Obviously, if you're watching this on video, you'll see that the top right-hand side of my face is best lit. That's where my key light is. There's then something called a filler light as well, which comes opposite the key light, but that's less light, it just fills in a little bit of shadow. And then there's something called a rim light at the back. So just at the back of my hair, I've got a little touch of light there. You can hardly notice it unless I point it out there. Yeah. And of course, I've got a few lights in the background there as well. That's something that can really make a Logitech C920 camera look a lot better simply by better lighting. Yes. But at this stage, I mentioned you're not going live. You're using the camera as pre-recorded. So if you're recording a podcast, if you're having discussions with someone, you don't need to think about an audience or anything like that. Don't need to think about the technicalities of live streaming. Get comfortable with recording a video before moving on to step 4, live streaming while you podcast. Then you're comfortable with video. Then you're at the stage where you can do things like engage with the audience. You can look at questions coming in. You can not be thrown off by questions coming in. Still stay focused on what your guest is saying, but read what the audience is saying at the same time, and at the right stage bring in the questions.
So David, around live streaming, so when is live streaming, I've seen this quite a lot recently. It's on LinkedIn, it's obviously on Facebook. Why would you use live streaming as a marketing kind of format?
It's a lot of people advocate being able to show more of your own personality, and live streaming offers that opportunity. Some people use a channel like Instagram to do that, to show their own personality, so that people can learn who the person is behind the business a little bit. But live streaming will do that as well, especially if things aren't perfect. So what you can do is, while you're recording a podcast, jump on a live stream and say, hey, we're going to be recording an episode today. Hope everything goes okay because we're doing it live here, and engage with people that have joined up. Say, hey, how you doing there? Have a little conversation with someone. Start the recording of a podcast. Say, okay, we're going to record the podcast now, but we're going to stay on this live stream and answer your questions just specially afterwards. We record the podcast as a little thanks for coming on with us. So it's a great way to engage with people on a one-to-one basis.
Okay. And as you say, that's kind of stage 4 of the evolution of audio and video content that you're using as part of your content strategy. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people use live streaming as a separate medium. I tend to think about, okay, how can I combine things without deteriorating the quality of content or relevance of content that I'm trying to produce for other mediums? And I think that if you're doing live streaming and podcasting at the same time, it's important to try to master the art of producing reasonable audio or a decent podcast, or knowing what your show format is initially before contemplating live streaming.
For any agency thinking about doing a podcast, a vodcast, some kind of content, audio and video based content, what would be your kind of key message to them as they're starting off?
You have to know why you're doing it. You have to know what type of content it is you're trying to deliver, as in, are you trying to deliver episodic hub type content? So let's go back to why you're doing it. Are you actually trying to get sales? Are you trying to engage with an existing audience? Are you trying to build a new organic audience? Yeah. It's a lot tougher nowadays to build a new organic audience straight away. Think of adding in a little bit of paid promotion perhaps as part of it as well. So don't necessarily think that you're going to be able to suddenly drive thousands of new organic subscribers through podcasting. It's starting to mature a little bit in terms of medium. There's well over 1 million podcasts out there nowadays. So
1 million
do
podcasts.
It for you.
Wow.
A million.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's doubled. It's actually about 1.5 million now. A year ago, it was about 800,000. So it's just about doubled in a year. So the growth is quite incredible over the last year or so.
Wow. David, that's been really fascinating. I mean, really interesting. Thank you. There's been some great messages there for the people that are listening and watching. So where can people find out more about you?
Sure. I mentioned briefly my podcast. That's Digital Marketing Radio. So I'm in the process of developing the website. So digitalmarketingradio.com is the site. Hopefully by the time you go there, it will be relaunched and available, but you can always search for it online and find the podcast. And I produce podcasts for B2B brands at my agency, castingcred.com.
Very good indeed. David, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mike.